Please help me welcome Dr. Mamphela Ramphele. She is the co-founder and global ambassador of Reimagine South Africa. Dr. Mamphela Ramphele has had a celebrated career as an activist, a medical doctor, an academic, a businesswoman, a global public servant, and she's a political thinker. Following the Soweto uprising in 1976, where she was detained without trial, later released, and served an apartheid banning order, she studied medicine at the University of Natal. She has a BCom degree, a diploma in tropical hygiene, a diploma in public health, and a PhD in social anthropology. She went on to become Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town, and then one of the 4 managing directors of the World Bank, based in Washington, D.C. Dr. Ramphele is the author of several books and publications on socio-economic issues in South Africa. She has received numerous awards, national and international, acknowledging her scholarship and leading role in spearheading projects for marginalized people in South Africa and elsewhere. Dr. Ramphele, welcome.
Thank you very much. I just feel very privileged to have the opportunity to see Africa the way it should be seen. You are it. With you in leadership, we are going to realize our full potential as a great continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Doctor, this is going to be a conversation. We would like to talk to you. And one of the key things that happened last night is that we hosted a debate, and one of the fellows mentioned Ubuntu. And as we started here, Ubuntu reverberated once more. So I'd like to find out from you, can you share with me your thoughts on Ubuntu and your experiences of it from an early age?
Well, I grew up where I was born in northern Limpopo. And I grew up on the foot of the Soutpansberg Mountains. Beautiful country, very rich. We had plenty of everything. So when people talk about land reform and restitution leading to food insecurity, I wonder what they're talking about. Because I'm a product of 2 grandfathers and grandmothers who were very successful peasant farmers. But what is really important is that we were brought up from the time you were a toddler to know that you are a person in the context of your connections to others. You can't do things which are selfish. So when you do something wrong, they say, a person doesn't do that. When you refuse to share your sweet or your whatever, they say, a person doesn't do that. They don't say a good person, a person. So Ubuntu is a very deeply rooted African philosophical viewpoint, which arose out of the fact that we are the cradle of humanity. Every person in the world is an African because we come from this continent. And the reason humanity evolved here in the midst of all the other animals, including those that like meat, is because human beings learned that the only way you can survive and prosper is to be connected and work with others. Because if you are connected, you are able to protect one another, but we are also able to achieve a lot more. And here on this continent, when we have conversations, we sit in a circle. Because this Ubuntu is also about there is no better person and lesser important person. In a circle, we are all equal. But importantly, we are making eye contact. And so Ubuntu is not just a philosophy of life. It is a very important survival, but also prosperity-inducing approach to life. And so I hope that we don't only greet one another and start using Ubuntu just as a branding exercise. It is a sacred philosophical viewpoint. It's very important to keep remembering that, because we are in South Africa now 24 years old as a democracy. If we didn't have the wisdom of Ubuntu, it would have been very difficult for Tata Mandela to speak to people who had jailed him. So he was able to transcend the chasm of an oppressor and oppressed and see their humanity, and in turn induce them to see that we are better as a human race by connecting together.
Well, thank you very much. There's a phrase that I've been taught, and I hope I say it correctly. Umuntu, ngumuntu, ngabantu.
Ehe. Kasi suturi remutu, kimutu, kababamwe. Kasi nguni, whether it's Xhosa or Zulu. Ungumtu, kabanye abantu.
Thank you. So let me just take you back to your early days as a young person. You are in a room full of so many young people, and growing up in apartheid South Africa. Can you take me through what it is that sparked your leadership interest and activism?
The most important thing that helped shape who I am is growing up in a family of teachers. So excelling was not something that you regarded as optional. It wasn't a question of, are you going to pass or not? No, it's a question of how you pass, right? And as you can see, I have not quite progressed sufficiently physically. So I didn't have physical strength, but I knew I had something up there. And my father was a towering figure who always questioned why I got 90% instead of 100%. And so I lived in a family of high expectations. But then my father died when I finished high school during the first year at university. And as I was preparing to go to university, he asked me, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be a doctor. He said, but can you see that I'm ill? How are you going to do it? I said, the Lord will provide. You see, out of the mouths of babes. But that decision helped me to find myself at the University of Natal in KZN. For the first time, I was able to mix with young South Africans from all over. And at that time, we were called non-whites, non-Europeans on this continent. Can you imagine going to America and calling them non-Africans? They'll run you out of town. But at that time, we didn't realize that, in fact, our humanity was being undermined by being measured against the standard of the very people who came and dispossessed us. It is at that time, this is now late 60s, early 70s, that we also got to know about the Black Panther movement in the US, civil rights movement, and of course there was a student uprising across the globe. And we did the Me Too. We got into the act. But at that time of apartheid, you couldn't get, there was no TV, there was no radio that will tell you what was going on. But we were rather innovative. So we linked with young people whose parents were working at university, so we got books from the library, which were banned. And we got to understand what was going on. And this encouraged us to understand that your humanity, your human dignity comes from you naming yourself. For as long as we called ourselves somebody else, we were nothing. The day we woke up with Nina Simone's song, I'm Black and I'm Proud, that was it. That was 50 years ago, and I'm still at it. Because once your passion for freedom is unleashed, you cannot put it back into the bottle. And so when I finished my degree as a medical student, I went and worked in poor communities in the Eastern Cape. And we were a whole community of black consciousness movement people. We're not people opposed to the ANC or the PAC or any of the other organizations. What we thought, and we were correct, was that black people needed to free their minds from the attitude of enslavement, of oppression, of thinking of themselves as inferior, and assume leadership as African people, the heirs of this great continent. And when we led with that attitude, we were able to work with poor communities. We were able to engage in conversations with anybody, whether they were New York Times, journalists, or whatever. But importantly, our approach to activism was to free our minds, psychological liberation, but also to be practical. That's why I like the fact that this fellowship forces you into practical action. Because you can't lead by talking about leadership. You lead by doing leadership. And we did leadership. And as a medical doctor, I could work with poor communities wherever. And of course, at that time, there was a very brutal regime. So each time they saw that we were succeeding in a community, they would ban and banish us. So I ended up in Zani in some godforsaken place. But guess what? It never stopped. And each time they shrunk my area where I was free to move, including the last bit, I was restricted to 800 houses in a little township. Don't worry about it. The people came. And when police tried to say to the chiefs, don't let this woman work with your people. She's a terrorist. They said, well, you have a problem with her? We work with her well because since she came to our village, our babies are not dying. We no longer have pellagra. We no longer have this. Our children go to ECDs. And so my encouragement to you is, whatever the hardship, find a way. Find a way out of every restrictive imposition on you. But all the time, respect the dignity even of the oppressor. That way, I was able to talk to this security captain, and he'll be shaking in his boots. And I'm just a tiny little person. But what he couldn't understand is why I wasn't angry with him, why I wasn't throwing insults at him. Why? He's a human being like me, just that we've got different emphasis.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Ramphele. A round of applause for that explanation. It brings me to an interesting part. The ideals that so many vibrant young leaders of your time, your generation, fought for, and the methods that you used may not directly translate to this generation and what we are trying to push and what we're trying to fight for. How do you think we can take some of that and harness it into pushing for leadership in our generation and the things that we should be fighting for?
I blame my generation for failing to enable, to build a bridge between our generation and your generation. And I can only speak about my country with some knowledge, but I guess it happens in other parts of the continent. Liberation movement activists, once freedom comes, they check out of engagement with others. And they install themselves as the people who are entitled to lead. In this country, we have a beautiful constitution. And yet, I know very few young South Africans have been enabled to appreciate that. We have life orientation in our school curriculum, and we don't even bother to bring the Constitution into that life orientation? How can I say we are preparing young people for the future, and the most important status you have is that of citizen, stewards of your democracies? And yet, my generation has not invested enough in making sure that there is civic education, there is values-based approach to your understanding of your stewardship, so that there would have been a handover from my generation to your generation. Thanks to these programs, that we now have a powerful movement of alumni of these programs. As we heard, 500,000 of you are around the continent. You have a greater responsibility because you have access to social media. We didn't have that. We used to travel third class in the train from one end to the other. Now you don't have to travel. You just sit and play with your thumbs. Please make sure that you stay connected, that you support one another as your countries go through the difficulties of post-liberation politics, which are, unfortunately, in many instances, politics of the stomach. You have brains, that's why you are here. You don't need politics of the stomach. You need politics of the brain, so that you can shift mindsets. Shift mindsets, not just of your generation, but of the generation behind you and the generation ahead of you, to challenge impunity in terms of bad governance, to challenge exploitation of ordinary people, but also to challenge some of the hangovers of negative traditional practices. I'm so pleased to hear about this young person who is challenging genital mutilation. I believe that you have a wonderful opportunity to make Africa this great continent that it can become. And you have already started. Just keep going.
Thank you, Dr. Ramphele. So it is interesting to note that we have more women than men in Africa, and yet that barrier to influential positions is still there. There are women who are struggling to break into sectors that are patriarchal, and those that are seemingly patriarchal. So what do you think women should do in this season, in this time, where Africa has arisen? What do you think females should do to get into the space where they can be in influential positions?
I think it starts with us freeing our mindsets away from thinking leadership men. Because when elections come, women don't vote for other women. They vote for men. It's exactly the same mindset that made us subject to colonial conquest. Women have to liberate their minds away from the assumption that leadership has to come with a pair of pants, and not just jeans, but I'm talking about the other pants. But the second thing is, we must remember that every man on the planet is a son of a woman. How we bring up our sons has a lot of impact on who they become. And I am a mother of 2 sons. There's nothing perfect, but you must always keep trying. Never give up the capacity to remind our sons, our brothers, our husbands, our friends, our colleagues, that every one of us have the feminine and the masculine within us. Women have more of the feminine, you have more of the masculine. They are meant to be complementary, not in competition. And to the extent that men nurture and honor the feminine side of them, they are the happiest, most handsome men I have ever seen. Because Because when you only play to the masculine, it becomes toxic. And even scientifically, testosterone is a very aggressive hormonal element. So it needs to be moderated. It's nature. That's how nature works. When you modulate it with the feminine, it becomes a powerful energy source for doing the things that men and women have been put on this earth to do. But I also believe we need to look very carefully at our curricula in the schools, in the religious educational programs, and also in our homes and in our workplaces. I know here in South Africa, women talk about you've got to check your femininity at the door when you walk into corporate South Africa. That's not good, because we know something else. McKinsey did a study through their institute that if the world were to operate with the full equality between men and women, it would, by 2025, have $28 trillion more than the global GDP. Now think about it. Why are we missing out on this wonderful opportunity? By just simply discriminating against an energy source that should be propelling us to higher prosperity. So just think about it. Every day you discriminate against a woman, you are taking away from the common good that could be coming out of collaboration. And you women, don't allow the men to get away with murder. Help them to always be the good partners that God created them to be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramphele. I like the fact that you mentioned that it is also how we raise our sons. We raise our sons knowing that when they meet women and when they interact with women, they are also interacting with people who have a lot to put on the table. This leads me to your definition of servant leadership. How do you define it?
Servant leadership is really purposeful leadership that has a goal outside of the self. There is nothing as boring as waking up in the morning and wondering, how am I going to be great? It's the most boring thing. Because you are not going to get great by doing that. But if you wake up in the morning and you reimagine what the world can be like, what your corporate company where you work could be like, what your country could be like, what your family could be like, if only you were to apply your mind to making that difference that only you can make. Because each one of us are unique, completely unique. This is the other wonderful thing about humanity. Even identical twins have got unique personalities. And that uniqueness is the value add that we bring to everything we do. So a servant leader is a leader who always sets goals that are about how do we make the world a better place by starting with me being a better mother, father, sister, husband, colleague, friend, citizen, everything. It's not pie in the sky. It's very practical. And you can see servant leaders even as they walk. First of all, I'm so pleased that you started with Sawubona. The Sawubona has got something else besides I see you. It's not saying Diakubona. It's saying Sawubona. We are seeing you. Who are the we's? The we's include my ancestors, myself, and those who are coming. Isn't it wonderful? Now, every day you wake up, you are serving those people. You are making the future better for those who are still to come. And you are honoring those who brought you into this world. And every one of the people you encounter during the day in a conference here, just remember that you have a legion. We have a few hundred people in here, but actually each one of us is coming here with the whole legion of a generation, generations behind us and generations in front of us. But the most important other thing about servant leadership is that you become accountable. Accountable not just to yourself for good performance, but accountable for those you are honoring and accountable for those who are coming. One of the biggest problems on this continent in terms of leaders of my generation is lack of accountability. You can't be a servant leader when you say, I don't care. How can you not care? How dare you not care? And accountability is not only to fellow human beings, you are also accountable to the universe. We have messed up the world. Mother Earth is bleeding because we were not sufficiently aware of our servant leadership responsibilities and our accountabilities to those who are coming. So each time we mess up the planet, we pollute the environment, we are in fact not acting as servant leaders. But servant leaders do something else, which is the last part, which is to keep that vision of a reimagined company, family, world, country, right there in front. Never ever be satisfied with what you are seeing. Always stretch your imagination. Because when you do that, and we know when you are imagining something great, you just feel you ooze energy. So if you keep your imagination alive of a world, a country, a place on this earth, a continent, that is better than it is, you are truly serving not only those next to you, but humanity and the universe.
Wow, what a true explanation of servant leadership. Can we give her a round of applause for that? We are in a room of Mandela Washington Fellows. They are the true exemplars of servant leadership. These fellows excel in technology, they excel in education, they're in businesses, they have non-profit organizations, they're activists, they're lawyers, they're in the public sector, and they have displayed servant leadership and would like to take it further. But it wouldn't be right if I don't allow some of them to ask a few questions as we round up this conversation. So I am opening up this conversation to the floor, and I will direct, if there's anyone who would like to ask a question to Dr. Mamphela Ramphele, I see a hand over there. When we have speakers who can speak to us on subject matters, it is key that we take as much as we can and glean from that wisdom. Yes, please.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mahaman Jite from Mali, Timbuktu. So I work a lot about women empowerment in Mali. So I have one question for you. So we think that if a woman is empowered, an entire nation is empowered. But in our traditional grassroots community, it's not a reality because elders think that if a woman is empowered, she can never be a good wife or a true member of a society. What do you think about traditionalist understanding about women empowerment? Thank you.
I had the good fortune when I was banished to that place, Never Never Land. I worked with traditional women, traditional chiefs, and young, very poor and disempowered women. You need to find a practical way that will include those generations together with it. They mustn't see it as taking away from. They must see it as adding to. And so, in the case of Zanin, the grandmothers are the final decision makers when it comes to healthcare of the children, their grandchildren. And so instead of my engaging with the mother of the child only, I made sure Kokwana is there so that we create a collaborative relationship between the older woman and the younger woman, and with me empowering the young woman without looking like I disregard the older woman. And when the police were saying that I'm a terrorist, the people who defended me were the traditional chiefs, because they could see the benefit that I had brought through the projects that were doing bricks, that were doing vegetable gardens, and so on. So you've got to find a route into the heart. You see, when you touch the heart of anybody, it opens up their mind to say, oh, perhaps this person can be helpful. But if you start with the mind, it's not going to work. If you get there and say, well, you see, gender equality, it's not going to work. Let's talk about something that touches their hearts. Then they are open. When you get to talking of, they will be the ones saying, hey, you must also help. Can't you see this woman is tired? Now she's talking to her son. You see? That's the way. You must go behind, into the heart. The mind opens up. Then magic happens.
True strategies right there that we should take note of when you start with the heart. There's a gentleman in that aisle.
Thank you so much. My name's Julius Mtatiro from Tanzania, and I'm a political leader. Madam Doctor, currently in Africa, we have got about 1.2 billion people. And it is said by 2050, the population of Africa is going to be about 2.4. We're going to double. And the unemployment rate is alarming. Most of the African countries and the policymakers are not doing a great work. We are not doing a great work actually to solve the unemployment problem in Africa. And the research are showing that at least to catch the 2050 gap, the whole of Africa need at least to produce 18 million jobs per year, of which we are not doing about 20 or 30% of it. Please, just your advice to the African policy makers. What steps should we follow at least to cater this problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first step is no country, no region, no continent has ever succeeded anywhere in the world without food security. And Africa has one of its richness is its landmass. We have seen in Ethiopia, and now we're seeing a little bit in Zimbabwe, where we go back to carbon-based agriculture and involve the people who are at the so-called bottom of the pyramid. Women are the ones currently eking out an existence to keep body and soul together. But imagine if we could deliberately, as a continent, decide that we are not only going to make sure we are food secure, but that we are going to produce surpluses to export to the rest of the world, which is now hungry for organic food, okay? But we've got to do the second thing, break down the barriers. Because transactional politics, one of the problems is that each little despot wants to be in charge of a little country. Instead of us having a borderless continent with countries that are currently countries being regions within this continent. And can you imagine the power of it? That when we trade amongst ourselves and we have taken away all the corruption of border control and so on, we will do magical things. because we will not only get our consumables cheaper, but we will also be able to have specializations so that we can, as a continent, compete on the global stage in a way that no one else can. We have indigenous crops, indigenous livestock, like the Nguni cattle, that actually are very resilient. Why are we not leveraging that? So your generation, I believe, you must be the first generation to not just talk about collaboration across borders, but live it. When you set up your business, make sure you collaborate with someone like Bosco is doing, like other people are doing. And when we do that, we get into the habit of collaboration. The third thing we need to be doing is to make sure that we make the teaching, the learning, and the promotion of our cultures and languages real important assets. I don't know how many of you know that Ireland used to be a land known for potato famines. Today, it is an extremely wealthy region. When they made the peace between the Protestants and Catholics, one of the areas they invested in was language, culture, tourism, and ancient history of that region, so that people can know that, you know, Africa is a contributor to global knowledge. Don't listen to all the nonsense about the Greeks coming to, they came to learn from Africa. But our children don't know that. And so they say, well, I can't do mathematics. How can you not do mathematics when your great, whatever, invented mathematics? The pyramids, they're an indication of just the technology that was there millions of years ago. But our children don't know that. So they look to New York and, heaven forbid, and London and other places for models. Here, we have it. Mali, the people in Mali knew all about astronomy, cosmology, and architecture, which still continues today. So we have everything going for us. But what is needed is finding that route to mindset change via the heart. And that's your responsibility. I'll be there cheering you and doing the little bit I can.
Thank you very much. A round of applause to Dr. Ramphele. We cannot take any more questions.